So let's begin working on the second model for our application. The first one was docs, or doc actually, which is a singular. And the second model we'll be working with is user. And to work on users, we added the devise gem. This enables us to work with users in our application. We added it to our gem file at the very beginning of this tutorial, but there's still some installation steps that we need to take. So if you go down here and click on the home page, it will take you to the GitHub repository, and this is where all the directions are for devise installation. It actually gives you very clear instructions on what steps to take. So we added the gem devise to our gem file. We also ran bundle install, and now we need to take this step actually. So we need to copy this. Let's take this into our terminal, paste it in, and run it. And it gives us a series of steps that we have to take. So let me actually zoom out here to show you the 5 steps. The first one will be to essentially copy this and add it to our config environments development.rb. So let's copy this. Let's go back into Sublime Text. That's config environments development.rb, and this is going to be at the very bottom here. So let's paste this in. And this is essentially about mailing, or the mailing settings for devise. So if the user forgets their password, you want to have somewhere to send their contact information so that they can log back in. But it's not really that important for us, but we're just including. And let's save this. Let's go back into our terminal, I should say. And the second one is, or it actually gives us some information about production, which we're not worried about. We also set the root home to index. We're not worried about that right now. This is a flash message that we need to add to our views layouts application.html.erb. So let's go back into Sublime Text, and this is in layouts application.html.erb. And this is actually a document we haven't even started talking about, which is obviously something we will build. We'll also change it to HAML later on, but for now let's leave it as it is. And just to give you a quick introduction though, all of these files, the view files of our application, are rendered here in this yield. This is the template for our entire application. So if you wanted to add navigation to our application, you would do it here. If you wanted to add a footer, you would add it here. Essentially, the things that don't change for the application, the logo, the title, things like that, are always on the application.html.erb, and then all the view files are rendered in the yield. So for now, let's just save this. Let's go back into our terminal and finish the installation process. We don't want to deploy this to Heroku, at least now. So let's leave step number 4, and let's worry about step number 5. So let's copy this, and we want to paste it here at the bottom. So Rails generate devise views, and this creates the views for our application, as you can see, for sign up, login, and things like that. So we've taken step number, the last step. Now we actually need to begin working on this specified step right here. So it's Rails generate devise model. Our model is going to be user. So let's go back into our terminal. It's going to be Rails generate devise, and our model is user. So let's run this. This creates the model for us, the migration file, and also testing files. We're not worried about that for now. And also this is models/user.rb that we'll be working on in just a moment. So at this point, let's run rake db migrate to push all these changes to the database. And this will update our schema.rb file, which you'll also see in just a moment. It's also a good time at this point to go back into our server and refresh it. So we Control-C and then restart the server. And then let's go back here. Let's clean this out. Let's just zoom in a little bit, and let's do git status here to see all the changes we've made. Let's git add this, and then git commit with the message. We install devise. Perfect. And then at this point, let's actually go into our browser and see if we can create a user. So instead of docs here, it's going to be /users/sign up. This was one of the view files that was created for us. So let's say user@example.com, create a password for it, we've successfully signed up. And this is that the alert message or the notice that we also added to our application.html.erb. These alert messages will show up on every single page. That's why we added it to our application.html.erb. So right now we want to add a user column to a user ID column to our documents table. So let me actually go back into Sublime Text and exactly show you what's going on here. Let's close out of here. Let's go back into the DB. Let me show you the schema. So we created a table now for users. There's also a table for documents. The problem is that these two tables are not associated. There's no association between them. So we want a new line here at the very bottom of the documents table that gives it a user ID. That way, every single document has a title, a content, when it was created and updated at, and it also has a user ID so that later on we can identify the documents and display only the documents that belong to the user who created them. So to do that, we actually need to run a migration. That's how we change the databases in Rails. You don't actually change the schema.rb file. You go into the terminal and run migration commands. So let's go into our terminal and let's run the command Rails generate migration, and this is going to be add user, ID to docs, and we want our user ID to be an integer. Perfect. And this makes the changes for us. It also creates this migration file, which we'll see in just a moment. At this point, we also want to run rake db migrate. This pushes all the changes to the database. And then let's actually go back into our schema file at this point. You'll see here just now that the user ID column was added to the docs table. And this was the last migration we created. And the schema.rb is the current snapshot of our database, the latest version of our database right now. Another way of actually checking this, this is not necessary, but if you were to go back into our terminal, and if we go into Rails console, which is how we interact with the database, if you were to do add doc equals doc.first, let's say for example, you see that there's this new column in the table that's for user ID, but it's nil, as in there is no user ID assigned to this document when we first created. So let's actually first go back into our Sublime Text and begin working on associations for these for the two models that we have. So let's go into not here, models, doc.rb, and then user.rb. So for doc.rb, we want to say it belongs to the user. Let's save this. So all documents belong to user. That's essentially what it's saying. And we want to say here that the user has many documents, or actually docs, like that. Let's save this. So the user has many docs, and the doc belongs to many user, or the doc belongs to user. So let's go back into our controller. So let's stay here, and in the controller we actually want to change how new documents are created from this point forward. So we're going to create a new document and then show how user ID has been assigned to that document. So right now the documents that are created have no association with users. There's nothing that says that it needs to have a user, or that it's built from the current user. So let's change that right now. So instead of doc.new, we're going to say add doc equals current user, because again, only current user can create the doc, or the document is being created from the user. It's going to be docs.build, and then we can actually just copy this and then just paste it here. Again, the only difference is that this refers to the params, and the doc params again is defined here, title and content. So let's save this, and let's actually go back into our browser and try to create a new document. So it's going to be docs. Let's create new document, and let's say this is doc 4 testing doc, and let's create this document. So let's go back into our terminal at this point, and let's first get out of our Rails console, and then actually I think it's reload with the bang to refresh our console. So now we can go at doc equals doc.last. And you'll see that when we first ran doc.first, user ID was nil. There was no user for it. But now there is a user ID. There is a person who's responsible for creating that document. So everything works as we want it. So let's get out of the console by holding Control D. And let's clean this up with Command K. And let's do git status. These are the changes we've made so far. Git add all. Git commit with the message. And this time it's going to be association between user and files. Perfect.